Man, you know, I'm like 3 years into this stuff. All I've been doing is just following swipe workouts and TikTok workouts and bodybuilding.com workouts. When am I ever gonna learn how to do this for myself?
Don't worry, my friend. Your wishes will be granted. Today, I'm gonna teach you how to build a program, step by step, and I'm gonna make it so simple for you.
Well, dude, why should I listen to you?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about my story. When I first started training, I gained 20 pounds super quickly on just going to the gym consistently and eating more consistently. And eventually, that progress ended up slowing down quite a bit. And it wasn't until maybe a year and a half ago that I started learning these tools and learning how to apply them to me. And I'm like, training cannot be this simple. It really can't be this simple. And once I started applying these things, my physique in the last 2 years alone has made more progress than it ever has before. And I've ultimately learned throughout this process that training, above all of it, is the driving force. And it's really that simple. It really is that simple. If you look at Adrian, he's gained 20 pounds. Yes, sure, he's eating a surplus, although the dude just trains really well. He doesn't do more than 6 to 8 working sets of legs in a single session. He doesn't do 3 days a week just to grow his legs. He just eats in the surplus, sends his technique videos, and applies these tools that I'm gonna teach you today. Megan was able to gain muscle tissue throughout her prep and lose about 15 pounds and get shredded for her show day. Training was also the driving force of that. Sure, we ate a deficit, sure we were in prep, although she still got stronger using these techniques in her training program. Dan, he's gained 20 pounds with me and lost 25 pounds with me. Throughout this whole process, training is what made this transformation. It didn't matter what gas or oil we put in his machine. We just had to have a really good running machine and a really good engine in that machine, and that's training. That's the program. That's how we can apply it to you to make those results. Jose, he's went from about 200 pounds up to like 220 pounds. Sure, again, we're eating in the surplus. That is basic knowledge and information. Although it's training that has made the difference here. It's the technique that he uses. It's consistently sending form videos with us. And amongst all these people and all the people I've worked with and myself, it's crazy to see how simple the process is. And what's really fun about it all is like it makes the process that much more fun. It makes the process that much more enjoyable because you get to go in the gym and you get to go beat your numbers and you get to go make these little and small improvements and pay attention to that, and like falling in love with the details and falling in love with the simplicity of all of it is what has created not only these results but my personal results. And I want to teach you all of that today and essentially make it so easy for you to take this knowledge, run with it, and make the best progress you ever had.
All right, dude, I'll give it a shot. I'm just tired of like running my volume super high and like running myself into the ground and thinking that I need to do this exercise on the internet or this exercise on the internet to be most optimal. And honestly, it's just gotten super confusing. So anything you can help me with today, man, like I'm ready.
All right, so we're gonna break this down step by step. We're gonna go over number 1, training split you're gonna choose and the exercises that you're gonna select. Number 2, we're gonna go into rep ranges. Number 3, we're going into progression, how to progress within your training program. Number 4, how to use volume to progress. Number 5, the boring stuff, how to back off and how to plan that diligently. So all in all, over my time being a coach and working with Beyond Built, and it's honestly just like really investing in my own personal journey as an athlete, these are really the 5 things that I found that if you can understand these things and just simply have an understanding. You don't need to be an expert, but just have a basic understanding and knowledge around these things, you can be able to build yourself a program. Are you gonna build a perfect program for yourself? No. Will we really ever? No. I don't think perfection ever really exists. And that is the most fun part about this process because you will make mistakes. You will learn as you go. Although, when you make mistakes and you have basic understanding of these 5 methods, these 5 tools, you can solve those problems. You can solve those mistakes that much faster. You're able to pinpoint what might not be working here. So let's go into this. Let's go into number 1 here. It comes really down to choosing the training split. And that could be like, okay, should I be going to the gym 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week? Well, number 1, if we look at the pyramid breakdown of like what is actually most important within training. Adherability and sustainability is always going to trump all. your actual ability to adhere to go to the gym consistently matters more than anything that you guys are gonna learn today. And so if consistency is an issue, well, it's maybe because you're discouraged because things aren't working, so great, this will be good for you. Although adherability, sustainability is always number one, all right? So if you can't go to the gym 6 days a week because your schedule won't allow it, maybe do 4 and like get the most out of 4 rather than only getting to go to the gym 4 to 5 times a week, consistently missing sessions, and then your program actually doesn't end up working for you. And so training split, how does that match up with training age? Well, if you're a beginner, again, you can make a ton of progress without that much volume, without doing that many crazy things in the gym. So let's say you go to the gym 2-3 times a week. You do a full body split or an upper lower split, and you train everything in its totality. You'll probably make a lot of progress as a beginner doing that, because the truth is, if you go to 6 times a week and do super high volume training, like you see all these shredded, jacked people on Instagram doing, your body can't handle that yet. Your body needs to add more tissue. When you add more tissue, it can handle more volume, more frequency. So consider your training age here. If you're intermediate, going 5 times a week and doing like a push-pull leg or a push-pull leg upper lower is something that could work really, really well for you. Potentially 6 days, although in most cases, 6 days of training just really isn't needed. I'm currently on 5. I consider myself to be intermediate as well. We want to consider your training age. Are you beginner, intermediate, advanced, novice, whatever?
Dude, I don't know. I've been training about 3 years, and I think I'm starting to get pretty advanced at it now. How do I know what my training age is?
That's a really good question. Honestly, to make this really simple, you're a beginner if you're within your first 1, 2, maybe even 3 years. Intermediate, you're approaching like 3 up to 7. In advanced, you're approaching 7 up to 10. You could look at it in years. You could also look at it in terms of progression. As a beginner, you just get in the gym, you eat, you're gonna make a lot of progress. and until it tends to slow down a little bit. And once your progress starts really slowing down, you need to pay attention to a little bit more detail. And by paying attention to a little bit more detail, that's where you start becoming novice and intermediate. And so you had to really think about it that way when it comes to your training age. Number 2, stick to and master the basics. This means your basic human movement pattern. There's a squat, there's a push, there's a pull, there's a row, there's a deadlift, there's a thrust, like basic human movement patterns. And when you look at that, it's like those are your compound exercises. That's your bench, that's your deadlift, that's your squat. And so when you're thinking in terms of, well, I wanna pack on muscle, I don't wanna do barbell movements all the time, I wanna do dumbbell movements all the time. Well, compound movements actually provide you a great opportunity to get a ton of stimulus, meaning that you're gonna get a high level of disruption, tension, and burn in that target muscle, and you're gonna build strength pretty rapidly doing those exercises and build yourself out a great baseline of strength, great baseline of technique, great baseline of skill to take into the later halves of your training career. So when it comes to sticking and mastering the basics, if you think about it in terms of an athlete, if you put, let's say, a first round draft pick and you put them in practice with the Philadelphia 76ers for their first ever practice, you think they're gonna go say, hey, let's practice fadeaway shots. Let's shoot 100 fadeaways in a row. Let's shoot off the dribble, double pump fake, fadeaways from the back corner right away. No, they're gonna start with skill work. They're probably actually gonna start with training and then skill work and then most likely conditioning to get them up to speed and then run through basic fundamentals and drills. Probably shoot some free throws. I'm no expert, but I can tell you what, in sport and in practice, they still master the fundamentals over everything. And so why should training be looked at differently than sport? When you start applying sport philosophies and ideals and the mindset into training, you start to see it for what it is, and it's like, okay, this is very basic, this is very fundamental, and if I get really, really good at the basics, I can probably make a lot of progress just by doing that.
All right, I'm gonna do the basics. How do I put that actually in the program?
So, how to break things down inside of a single session to help you with program design that much further. Think about movements as compound, secondary, and accessory. Pretty simple to understand the differences between here. A compound movement usually is going to involve a barbell, usually going to be a heavier pressing, squatting, or rowing motion. I would also put barbell row here as well, and hinge, like any hinge, RDL, stiff legged deadlift. I would all consider that a compound movement. It requires a lot of energy, requires a lot of stabilization to perform those exercises, and you can gain strength pretty rapidly, although they do have some of the highest fatigue costs. So a ton of stimulus, although pretty high fatigue. So usually you want to center these at the beginning of a workout when you are freshest, when your energy is highest. If I were gonna do a bunch of, let's say, leg extensions before squats, I'd probably be pretty fatigued on squats. Secondary movements are, machine work, a lot of machine work, like chest press, machine row, pull downs, cable rows, some cable work. A lot of accessory work goes into like tricep push downs and curls and calves and abs, and again, cable work, single arm stuff, lateral raises. I would really say are an accessory movement compared to a compound shoulder press, right? So when it comes to designing, think about what is going to be the highest output. What do I need the highest amount of energy for? Should probably put that at the beginning of the workout. And what do I need the least amount of energy for, the least amount of rest time that I can recover from pretty fast? Accessory stuff usually goes to the end. And you think about it, delts, arms, calves are all very small in comparison to chest, back, legs, right? It's gonna cost much more energy to train chest and back and legs than it is arms and delts.
All right, cool, man, but like, how do I know what exercises are gonna be best for me? Again, like on TikTok, I'm seeing like, you should do your leg press this way to bias this, and you should do your lat pull down this way to bias this. It's all confusing.
Milk out the progress to save variation, consider stimulus fatigue ratio. What does that mean? So this is super context dependent, right? An individual could get a ton of stimulus out of a barbell row and really make a lot of progress over the course of 16, 20, even 30 weeks of that. Progress minimally over time, add a rep, add 5 pounds every 2 weeks or so. On the other hand, some person might have barbell row and they've been doing it for 6 months, and their progression on that has stunted. And when they go in the gym, it's like, damn, I'm not really feeling my back engage as much on this barbell row as I used to. Might be worth switching to a dumbbell bilateral row or a machine row. And when you get on that and you feel the same, it's like, damn, I haven't felt a burn in my back like this in a rowing motion in like a long time. Cool, you probably ran the barbell row stale, and now variation makes a little bit more sense for you. Although, keep the movements in and just work to get a little bit progressively better with technique. Add a little bit more effort, add a rep, add a sets, and we'll kind of go into like what does adding volume look like, but milk out the progress with the movements that you have in there that are working. I think a big thing with training is just like, you want to ensure that there's a level of consistency within the exercises you're doing. Because how else are you gonna know if you're actually progressing within an exercise if you're switching things around all the time? It's like, the game is going in and saying, hey, if I did barbell row 135 this last week, I'm gonna beat that. I'm gonna get 1 more rep, or I'm gonna add 5 more pounds. Like, that is the game of training. And milk out the progress within your movements while they're still feeling really good, as long as you possibly can before adding variations. Consider stimulus to fatigue ratio. What does that mean? Well, let's say that you're doing a back squat, barbell back squat. All right, and you get to the point to where you've gotten your barbell back squat from, God, this is awesome progress, over 2 years, 3 years, from like a 225 pound 5 rep max to a 365 pound 5 rep max. In 2 years progression from a beginner into intermediate, I think that's like pretty possible, which is wild, because when you get later in your career, it's like making that big of a jump is insane, crazy. Although it will get to the point where that 365 is probably just gonna beat your ass up, and it's like, damn, these sets of 5 are just huffing and puffing. I feel like my legs aren't recovering. I'm feeling like kind of achy joint pain. I feel like I can't really go through the rest of my leg workout and feel really good. Well, the squat and the barbell back squat might be a little bit too high fatigue compared to the stimulus that you get. And if you do hack squat, maybe still a squat pattern, but it's a machine, or a pendulum squat, it's a little bit less backload, a little bit less harsh on the CNS, and you do sets of like 8 to 12. You're like, damn, I have not felt my legs pumped like this in so long, and I'm not like on the floor afterwards, and I can still finish the rest of my workout, and I'm recovering better between my sessions. You're probably getting a higher SFR, meaning that your stimulus in your legs is really high, and your fatigue isn't as high. And bodybuilding is a really simple game. Think about it, hypertrophy and bodybuilding in a sense like, all right, if I can train a movement with really good technique, close proximity to failure, recover before my next session, I am doing things right. And if fatigue is getting in the way of your recovery, then your stimulus is low, your fatigue is too high, and you're probably not gonna grow much, because your growth happens during your recovery. So if you're fatiguing yourself all the time, doing too much volume, too many exercises, too many reps, the fatigue is gonna get in the way of how you're gonna be able to recover.
All right, man, cool. Kind of makes sense. But now you're mentioning reps, and I'm like, should I be just doing my 5x5s all the time? Do I need to be doing like supersets and burnout sets to end my workout and like ending with as many reps to failure as possible? Like, how do I choose rep ranges, dude?
Great question, and here we go. Choosing reps magically appears on the whiteboard. Crazy, who would have thought? 5 to 10 reps, 10 to 20 reps, 20 to 30 reps. That doesn't really look like 3. I promise I try my best. Anyways, this is the entirety of a hypertrophy rep range. And you might say, why do I need 20 to 30 reps? That's cardio. Kinda is. But like, yeah, it kind of is cardio. Anyways, let's start with 5 to 10. Why did I say that this is ideal for beginners? You gotta think about it this way, all right? Beginners have a high likelihood of gaining a lot of strength really, really fast. Although, technique might not be the best strong suit as a beginner, and you don't have that much muscle mass as a beginner. So working into higher rep ranges with not a lot of muscle tissue, form can tend to break down pretty easily. Fatigue can accumulate upon you pretty fast, right? And so 5 to 10 rep range is a really good rep range to maintain really good technique and form while gaining strength pretty rapidly. So I like 5 to 10 reps a lot for beginners. Even if you're intermediate, it doesn't mean that you have to get away from this, right? It does not mean at all that you had to get away from this. Again, we need to really consider what rep range is gonna serve you well. And a lot of that comes down to just tracking your data and progressing. And we'll get into that in the next step. 10 to 20 reps, great for SFR. SFR is short for stimulus to fatigue ratio. You guys know that I just explained that in the previous one. Is anything falling? So great for SFR, meaning that it's good for hypertrophy due to the fact that stimulus is really high, yet it doesn't have that high fatigue and that high taxation on the CNS. That's something like a 5 rep barbell back squat would, or a 5 rep barbell bench would, or a 5 rep deadlift would, right? So not the best for strength in that sense, because if you were doing 5 to 10 reps, you'd probably get much stronger from a numbers standpoint. Although if you're here, you're probably wanting to get jacked and juicy, right?
Yeah, dude!
Again, not the best for weaker or poor technique individuals, meaning that if you don't have that much muscle mass, you're not that strong yet, you aren't feeling fully confident in your technique. Guys, by the way, if you want a breakdown on what is way more important than all of this, actually, I don't know about that. Technique is everything, right? None of this is going to apply unless your technique is good. So if you guys want a free resource to a training, a live video training that I did on technique, click the first link in the description and it'll take you right to that video. 20 to, again, to kind of break this down, if you're weaker or have poor technique, your technique will kind of break down past that 10 reps pretty easily. Going into 20 and 30 reps, again, it's gonna feel like cardio. You would not do 20 to 30 reps with a barbell back squat. Okay, so when you look at these, it's like, you can honestly think about the same way that we were in kind of I'll call it slide 1. 5 to 10 reps works really well for compound movements. 10 to 20 works really well for secondary movements. This works really well for accessory movements. If you're doing bicep curls for 5 reps, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. 30 reps of back squat doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So a lot of that just comes down to is common sense. I mean, you can try it. If you want to try that, cool. You probably just won't walk. So low joint stress is a huge benefit here, which means that it's pretty good for hypertrophy. So like calf raises and lateral raises and curls and tricep pushdowns, it's gonna suck pushing to 20, 30 reps. It's gonna burn a lot, although you'll still be able to recover quite a bit and get a lot of workload with those higher rep ranges. Great for isolation, like I said, your isolated movements, which is typically your delts, your rear delts, your calves, your biceps, your triceps, things of that matter, your forearms even. So these are ideal rep ranges based on training age and based on movement type, right? Most of your compound, heavier exercises will lie in this rep range and more isolated movements will lie in this range. And using all 3, it's like, why would I need to use all 3? Can't I just stick to 1? Yeah, sure, you can. Although think about training this way. Think about it as skill acquisition. If you can train really well in all 3 of these rep ranges, your muscle and your physique will reflect it because you will have a healthy harmony of both fast twitch fibers that are really developed and slow twitch fibers that are very developed. And it makes you just a fucking all-around beast in the gym that can handle fucking anything. And that alone is going to serve you long-term more than anything. So, cool. You ready for a juicy time?
Yeah! Yeah!
My friend, welcome to the juicy part of this lesson, how to progress. We all want to know how to add more tissue, how to get more juicy. All right, understand that your first week in a training block is your baseline. Guys, stick around to the end of this video because when you see this and you see these kind of come together, it's like, all right, well, can I have like a template to kind of build a block into? Yes, you may. Stick around to the end of the video, I'll show you how to get that for free. Your first week of training is your baseline, all right? Meaning that during that first week, you get to track the amount of weight you did. You get to track the amount of reps you did. You get to track the amount of sets you did. And now you have an overall feeling of how that first week went. Now that's your overall judgment to say, how do I move forward from this? If it was extremely exhausting, making it more exhausting just going into the second week probably isn't the best idea, because you're gonna get to week 4 and be like, I hate bodybuilding. I can't sleep and I can't eat. Yeah, that's gonna suck. So understand, once you have that baseline, our goal is to make training harder and harder over time. Understand this, the further you get in your training career, the more it's going to take for you to continue putting on more muscle tissue. And I think a lot of people see this and they're like, okay, great. So like, if I want to add more tissue, I got to do more volume, got to do more volume, got to do more sets, got to do more sets. And I'm like, not always the case. Usually your technique and your overall effort within the gym needs to improve first. And once technique and effort's in a really good spot, now adding volume and using these progression models is something that will serve you very, very well. And so basic progressive overload here. Add 1 to 2 reps or 2.5% to 5% more load weekly. Super simple. If you do barbell bench and you do 2 sets of 8 in that first block. Going into that next block, maybe you can do 2 sets of 9, right? You add a rep to each of that, or maybe you get a drop off and you get like 10 on that first set and maybe 9 or 8 on that second set. That's still progression, right? And then once you hit, 10 sets, and let's say you got to 3 sets of 10. So you originally started at 2 sets of 8, and by week 3 or 4, you're at 3 sets of 10. Well, maybe might make a little bit more sense to add on 5 pounds to that. So do 230. And now you're at 3 sets of 230, and you got 230 for 8. And then you add a 4th set that last week of training, and you do 230 by 4 sets of like 9, maybe. Like you went 9, 9, 8, 7 even. Ton of progression. At that point, you're pretty fatigued, and it's time to back off, and we'll get into that in the next slide. But essentially, that's how normal progression is gonna work, guys. Week over week. How can you minimally and marginally improve without pushing too hard to where it inhibits your ability to recover by that next session? So this is why we say 2 working sets is a great start. So if you do a 4 to 6 week training block, which actually works extremely well, you get to start off at 2 sets. By week 4, you can maybe be at 3 to 4 working sets of exercises, all right? But 2 working sets is a good place to start, and by adding sets, you're adding more volume over the course of time, matched with really good technique. You're going to grow by adding more frequency, by adding more volume, by adding in more effort over that time, because we must, make training harder over time. Monitor your body's feedback. This one's really important. I wanna ask you, how are you feeling right now?
Dude, honestly, like you said, like I can't sleep or eat, and like I haven't had an appetite in like 4 months, bro. And like I'm barely sleeping at night, and I'm going to the gym and I'm like, I gotta train really hard, but I'm feeling like super tired and my joints are achy and stuff too, man.
Well, it sounds like you've just been overtraining. It sounds like you've just been doing maybe a little bit too much. A little bit too much. Usually, what really I've learned in my journey is I always used to think more effort, more intensity, more effort, more load, more volume, and essentially just ran me into a wall. Progressively as I just kept trying to add more, my technique broke down even more, and I got frustrated because like, I want to hit 100 pounds, I want to hit 150 pound dumbbells, I want to hit a PR. I'm like, fuck, I still haven't crossed this PR, I still haven't hit this goal, and you get super frustrated, and you're like, am I getting weaker? Like, why I'm eating in a surplus, and now the surplus feels like too much, and I'm getting too much body fat, and I'm like, this sucks. I've been there. I've literally been there, and this is exactly why I'm giving you guys every single fucking step that I have learned to create these transformations for myself and these clients and these beautiful fucking people. And so I hope, again, that this can be of value to you. Monitor your body's feedback, right? So if your hunger is super low, if you're going to the gym and your joints are achy and you're getting less strong, even if you're eating in the surplus and you're thinking that more and more is better, it's like, no, listen to your body, man. You need some rest. You need to probably back off. You're probably doing too much volume. You're probably doing too much frequency. You're trying to squat 3 times a week. You're trying to bench 3 times a week. You're trying to deadlift 3 times a week. You're trying to do 6 sets of 30 on barbell curl 4 times a week. No. All right, so honor your body's feedback and its ability to recover. Again, hypertrophy and bodybuilding is simple. Train with great technique, close proximity to failure, recover by that next session, repeat the process. Very simple. General rule of thumb. When you look at this, it's like, oh, well, that's not all too much. I'm like, yeah, less is usually more, especially when you're getting really good at technique and you're really starting to learn how to train with intensity. 6 to 12 working sets for a target muscle in a session is too much. And so if you're like, oh, if 12 is considered Completely ignore this sentence. I meant to say any more than 6 to 12 is too much, is what I meant. So any more than 6 to 12, ignore this, ignore that. Any more than 6 to 12. So like this is where you want to stay. Any more than that is too much. Okay, so you might see 12 and it's like, oh, that's the top end, I should be doing 12 all the time. Like, no, if you're starting off your first week of training with 12 working sets in total in a single, let's say you hit chest twice a week and you hit chest 12 sets of chest on one day, 12 sets of chest on another day. So you start off with 24 sets of chest in your first week of training and you keep trying to add to that and you end up at 32 sets of chest. Dude, my guarantee is you didn't get stronger. You just fucking tired yourself out like a lot. So let's say you start at 6 of 2 chest sessions a week in that first week of training. So that's 12 total working sets and you work over 4 to 6 weeks. You get the opportunity to work from 12 up to maybe 20, up to maybe 24, depending on how you want to take things and how your body's responding. And what is that? That's progression. That's progression. That's not running things stale. And so understand that's a really good rule of thumb. More than 3 exercises for a target muscle in a session is way too much. Yes. Again, if you go back to that last slide, you think exercise variation and selection. You don't want to burn out your variation, all right? You don't want to get to a point to where you've ultimately tried a bunch of different exercises and you've gotten to the point where like, okay, well, what other exercises can I do? I've ran everything stale, I'm making no progress. So like, again, you don't want to burn out future variation for a future program and a future block that you can implement for yourself. So you don't really need more than 3 exercises. And if you think you need more than 3 exercises, I guarantee you that you're not giving enough effort to those 2 to 3 exercises within that single session. If you're going into leg day and you're doing 8 exercises, I want to look at the intensity that you're training at. And unless you're Mr. Olympia and you're running pounds of gear and you're 300 fucking pounds, we're not, we're human. We gotta work with our bodies here, man. So that's a general rule of thumb. This is basic progression. All right. We got a copy for this one because this one's really gonna bore you. Backing off, the most boring part of training.
What the heck, dude? Why does it have to be boring? Why do I have to back off? I thought we just learned about progression. I was so ready to go super hard, man. What the heck?
Well, why don't you just explain to me how you feel again?
Fuck, man. I'm just tired, dude. I'm not sleeping. I'm not even hungry enough to eat my last meal of the day. Yeah, my joints kind of ache and dude, I feel like I'm getting weaker.
Let's teach you how to feel better. All right, training over time clearly accumulates fatigue. As you get deeper and deeper into a training cycle, as you guys are progressing, adding reps, adding load, adding volume, that stacks up on the body. That stacks up. Mile 1 is gonna feel easier than mile 2. Mile 2 is gonna feel easier than mile 3, so on and so forth. This is just how life works. It's gonna accumulate over time, and it's going to end up beating your body up a little bit. And what you'll notice is that maybe strength will drop off, right? Maybe it's a little bit harder for you to maintain good technique. Maybe your joints are becoming a little bit more wobbly towards the end of that training block. Pay attention to that, because what are you guys doing? You guys are beating yourselves up, adding more and more stress to the body. Training is a very strenuous activity. You're tearing muscle apart, you're breaking it down. So how do you grow? Well, you sleep. You recover, and if you're not sleeping, you're not growing, you're not recovering, you're gonna feel like shit in your training. So growth happens during your rest. So if we give ourselves a full week to rest after really beating ourselves up for about 4 to 6 weeks in length, we're really gonna spend a full week recovering, adapting. And the funny part is it's during your deload that you actually grow. You might think, oh, it's when my volume's the highest, when I'm going the hardest in the gym and doing all this crazy work. No, it's when you're resting is when you're growing. And so during your deload, typically your physique actually looks better. Typically your physique looks better, you feel energized. And sometimes you kind of hit a training burnout. And it's like, oh, I don't feel like training, my motivation is low. Like my training motivation is like feeling super low. I just like don't feel like going today. Like that is a end all be all sign usually that you're just like, oh, bodybuilding kind of sucks right now. Yeah, it's getting fucking hard on you. So taking that week off and resting and recovering kind of gets that excitement back. You get to the end of your deload and you're just like, all right, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling recovered, feeling fresh, I'm ready to freaking crush it now, right? So very simple to structure this in at the end of a training block. Your training block could be 4 weeks, it could be 5 weeks, it could be 6 weeks. Essentially over that time, you're gonna be adding volume, adding progression. And so you're gonna hit a point. And it doesn't need to be structured in. You can do this intuitively. I personally like to structure it in now. We're like, okay, it's time to back off. Usually an easy way to set this up is do about half of the volume of your peak volume. Intensity isn't the main thing that we need to drop off a ton. I would say drop off a little bit personally, I mean, you could just cut your volume in half and train at the same intensity. Personally, for me, training at the same peak intensity I was just training at in a deload isn't really conducive for me. It doesn't feel good. You know, my joints are a little bit taxed. It just doesn't feel good. I honestly go into my deloads pretty excited to deload because I push myself that hard at the end of my training cycle. So here's how personally I like to do a sample block, and we can kind of zoom in on this so they can see it because it's pretty small. Week 1, we're doing 2 sets of bench at 225, okay? This is just a sample, right? 2 sets of 10, and then on that second set, we get 9. Totally normal to drop off in reps, right? So I'm just making this super realistic. Week 2, we're gonna add a set. And as you add a set, you get 2 sets of 10. That's progression. You added a rep. And you do 1 more set, and that's 9. So you got to do 10 more reps than last week. That's amazing fucking progression in 1 week's time. But think about that. 10 more reps of a decently heavy bench press is probably gonna beat you up a little bit, right? Week 3, 3 sets, and you actually complete 3 sets of 10. So your goal going into this first week was, I'm gonna hit 2 sets of 10. You got 2 sets of 10. And now it's like, now I got 3 sets of 10. That is fantastic progression. Really, really good. And so now that you've hit all 3 sets of 10, it's probably a good idea to add load. You don't need to add a set. In this case, we did add a set. And we increased load up to 230. So we got 9, 8, 8, 7. Totally normal for this to be a drop off with increasing load. Going into this next week, we hit 9, 9, 8, 8. So we got to add reps at 230. So this whole entire time we progressed. And at this point, your bench will most likely feel really fucking heavy. Really heavy. So going into week 6, brought the sets back down to 2, and now we just did a couple sets of 7 at 220. We dropped the load a little bit, we dropped the intensity a little bit, we hit around 75% of the reps that we did on this first week, and this was our active recovery. This was our deload. It doesn't mean that you need to take the week entirely off the gym. It's a really opportune time to go in there and really focus on your technique, really focus on getting in the good pattern, getting some blood flowing, getting in some good movement, getting in some quality work, because taking a week off benching and then going back to benching is gonna feel different than still benching during your deload and not doing as much. It's gonna feel better. And so that is just a sample block setup. You guys can take a screenshot of this, grab this. It's like, this is basic progressive overload, basic progression. This is taking everything in this lesson, putting it together in a sample block. So again, if you guys want a sample training template, hit the first link in the description. It'll take you to our Facebook community and you can download it right pinned at the top of the group just for you. So this is it. This is how to build a program. Man, dude, I think I actually might get jacked and juicy.